So my recipe obviously calls for wild rice, and I like to use this blend, the Wild Blend by Lundberg. The whole recipe is gluten-free and dairy-free and vegetarian. You can use water to cook your rice in or some kind of broth, but because we're doing plant-based, I used vegetable broth to cook my rice in. Since it takes about 45 minutes, I've already cooked my wild rice. But I do have to get my squash in the oven. So I'm using acorn squash. You could use any hard squash. I'm sorry, I'm using butternut squash, but you could use an acorn squash or, another one of those hardy type squashes. And a little tip on this is, it's sometimes a pain to peel and cube a fresh squash, winter squash like this. So I cut it in half and I put it in my microwave for about a minute on high. This amount's about half of a medium squash. We're going to toss it with a tablespoon of avocado oil, a tablespoon of balsamic, a little salt and pepper. Spreading this out on a baking sheet, I've lined it with some parchment paper and try to get it into a single layer. And now I'm going to pop it into my preheated oven. It's preheated to 400. I'm going to give that about 10 minutes and then give it a stir. Yeah, I was going to say that looks like about 2.5, 3 cups. So now I should probably start putting together my vegetables. I'm going to start. I've already, just for the sake of convenience and time, you don't need to watch me chop vegetables. I've already prepped those. So again, I'm using the other tablespoon of avocado oil. I'm just doing this in my nice Dutch oven here. Heat that up. So first thing, here's all my veggies chopped. So the first thing is going to be my onion. I like to get them in there first to see if I can get a little bit of a caramelize them just a little bit. That might be more than 4 ounces of mushrooms, by the way. I just used what I had. Now I've got my garlic. So I'm putting in thyme and some rosemary. But those are both things that are if you have an herb garden, are very easy to grow and lovely and so much less expensive than buying those little packages of fresh in the grocery store. But if you do use fresh, definitely put them in early, like with the onions, so that it'll help to release the flavor. All right, now mushrooms in next. Now I'm going to put my corn in. Of course, I got it out of the freezer earlier and, rinsed it in cold water to thaw it.
I can smell it from here. Looks great.
So I'm adding, and which is in the recipe, the original one I did, adding chopped red pepper. Again, if you like yellow or orange or green peppers, do that. I love the bright red color that this red pepper brings to the dish. And then the last thing that I add in here with the vegetables will be my black beans. So you do need to rinse them really well and see, because there are a couple ways you can do it. You can soak them for like an hour and then cook them. You bring it to a boil and then let that sit for an hour, and then you cook it for 1 to 2 hours. Again, depending where you're living and how, just until the beans are soft. Or what I usually do is just let them soak overnight, and that's in cold water. Just let them soak overnight, and just enough usually to cover the beans by at least 1 inch or 2 of water. Then I rinse in the morning. I rinse those and again cover them with water and boil them for about an hour. Simmer for an hour. You can also, if you want to give a little bit more flavor, you can cook them in vegetable broth or just water. Add a little bit of salt, not much, because I'm probably going to use it in a dish that I'm going to add salt to. All right, beans are going in now. I think these are done enough. I'm going to put them in. I wish they were a little bit toastier. All my cooked veggies look like. And now I will plate it up. So I'm just using probably about 1/2 to 3/4 of a cup of my wild rice. And then I'll just spoon my veggies in the middle. I often buy fresh parsley and then forget to use it. But this is just garnish. There we have it. Lunch for me. You know, when you're talking about a Three Sisters, it's really 3 main ingredients: the corn, the squash, and the beans. So you could substitute almost any legume for the bean. Probably wouldn't use just regular green beans, white beans. You could use lima beans, any kind of bean that you like. It's harder to substitute something for the corn, although I was thinking I might like to try it with almost on a polenta mash. And of course, there's, I don't know how many kinds of squashes, but there's a lot of squash. You want to use a nice winter squash, but of course, if you were making the dish in the summer, and we talked in the class about potentially making it as a salad, cold salad, that you could use zucchini or summer squash and add some other seasonal vegetables to it. But you still want to keep some kind of bean, some kind of squash, and some kind of corn. Undercooking the roasting the squash or over roasting the squash. And then, there's like this very fine line. You want it to have that nice little crusty, toasty taste to it. You don't want it to be too soft or over seasoning. It's easier, obviously, to start with a small amount of some of your seasoning and then add more if it needs it. So tasting along the way is pretty important. Just remember, it's versatile, very versatile, in terms of you can substitute any kind of bean or squash in there. And the wild rice just has such a wonderful, again, toasty flavor to it. Sometimes it's difficult with the winter squashes to peel and cube them for roasting. So I cut it in half to start with, and then I put it in my microwave for about a minute, which just softens the outer peel. And it's so much easier to peel it and then cube it at that point. I would also do the cook your rice. If you want to keep it vegetarian, totally vegetarian, do it in a vegetable broth. Otherwise, if you're okay with it, use like a chicken broth or even a beef broth to cook the rice in. That kicks up the flavor a little bit.